Welcome to the Stubborn Love Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Bond. I'm a Gottman and attachment trained, solution focused marriage and family therapist. I specialize in helping folks design and build their dream relationships through structured therapy and resources, and also use modalities that go beyond traditional talk therapy, like accelerated resolution therapy and psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. School didn't teach us how to be good at love, so I created the Stubborn Love podcast to help you navigate it. Every episode has actionable tips that will help you create a happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life with the people you love. Join me on this journey of love and learning for the stuff they didn't teach you in relationship school. Welcome to another episode of Stubborn Love. We are going to talk about money today. We have a returning guest, Adam Kol, who is the couple's financial coach. We have another episode way early on back in the day, the early days of Stubborn Love. I'm so excited that we're kind of having this chat today because, Adam, you have a new book coming out and I have lots of questions
Yeah.
because finances seem to be coming up a lot in my couples therapy sessions lately. So
Mhm.
I have a lot of things to dig into. Just another part to brag about Adam before we do dive in and you introduce yourself to everyone. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Baltimore Ravens, CNBC. You are an expert when it comes to money, especially couples and money. So I'm so happy
Thank
to have
you.
you here and have you back. This is so cool and exciting. If they want
I
to
agree.
listen to your story and kind of learn a little bit about you, they can, of course, listen to the original episode that you were on. But do you want to give a brief kind of bio about you and how you got into this position of being a financial couples coach?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a numbers and finance kind of geek. As a kid, I watched CNBC. My grandfather I'd come home from school, go to my grandparents' house, and I would just love to watch all the numbers going by on the ticker, which had all the prices of the stocks up or down, what percentages. And so I was always just naturally interested in that and studied economics. I ended up going to law school. And after that, got a master's in tax law because I wanted to stay in that realm. And I worked as a lawyer. And actually, while I was in grad school, part of my journey was getting married and then divorced during grad school. And that was part of what ultimately inspired me to start getting involved in working on myself and trying to become a better person. And that led me down a number of paths, including to pursue a program to get certified as a mediator and ultimately start this coaching business. And in short, just saw there was a huge need at the intersection of relationships and money. Relationships are tough and money has its own unique wrinkles and can be really challenging. And once I realized that it was consistently listed as the biggest relationship stressor, I went on to Google and I was like looking for books and podcasts and people who focused on this, and I couldn't really find many. And I was like, I think I have as much qualification as anybody else to be husband.
Mm.
7 years ago?
And yeah, gosh, it's been quite some time for you to
Yeah.
get here.
Yeah. Coming up
And
on 7 years. That's what it is.
so accomplished. And
Thank
since we
you.
have last talked, we were talking about this a little bit. That is an update for you. There is the certification in becoming a financial therapist. Can you
Correct.
talk a little bit about that? What is a certified financial therapist? Who needs to go see one? What do you do?
Yeah. So, financial therapy is a relatively new field compared to, like, let's say, some of these ways of approaching individual or couples therapy, but it's really great stuff. And it combines financial planning and general, like, finance and economics principles, as well as mental health and psychotherapy principles. And so there's a robust study course and an exam, and then you have to come from certain professions or professional backgrounds. And through an organization called the Financial Therapy Association, they're doing really great work out there, not only on financial therapy, but to promote the idea that they are relating to each other about money, bring to the table. And the financial therapist's job is to guide you through the conversations that are really specific to money and your relationship with money and your money story, we call it, kind of like your perspectives and history. Uh, and then, of course, that's going to touch so many other aspects of your life because, like it or not, money does matter in our society. And so the goal there is to really just understand yourself better, cultivate peace of mind, improve your financial health, both in terms of the numbers, but also inside of you, right? And then bring some de-stress that a bit. And of course, for couples, how I think about it is my goal is to turn it into an area of connection, because not only does finance touch on so many different pieces of our lives in terms of it affecting them materially, but also it implicates so many of our most important values and our worries and the things that we care about. So that's always where I'm coming from, is helping couples hopefully strengthen their partnership through working on this thing.
Yeah. And I recognize, and this is what we're going to talk about today, anyways, but you mentioned like values when it comes to money. And I know that's like part of a chapter in your new book that we're going to discuss. And I would really like to talk about that and how that shows up in the room when you're working with couples. Before we go down that route, I just want to say, like, I know you specialize in couples when it comes to like financial coaching and therapy, but boy, I can tell you, you can have a niche when it comes to, providing that service for therapists as well, because I think we also have a lot of our own money stories, and it's really difficult being in a helping profession, but also like, ugh, we need to make a living too.
Absolutely. And I've heard that from a number of therapies here, but I'm like, it's okay. A doctor who is a cardiologist is not going to know everything about their feet. They would still go to the podiatrist to make sure they're getting something right. It's totally normal and okay. And yeah, therapists, just like everyone else, deserve to make a decent living, especially compared to what it costs to get those degrees and marriage and family therapy masters like you've got. I mean, you see the numbers that people are taking out in student loans. It's really big numbers.
Ugh,
And that can make for a lot of added stress in a profession where you're already potentially taking on stress just by virtue of the work and supporting your clients. So
yeah.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you can also see people who are either in the field used to numbers or in the field with mental health and how you normalize that. And I love the metaphor you used about cardiologists going to a podiatrist. Yeah, there's going to be some things that we're just not experts on. So why not go to the expert? So,
Thanks.
with us talking a little bit more today, focused on your brand new book that came out. So, your book is the title is, if I'm not mistaken, The Financial Intimacy for Couples. Is that it?
That's correct.
Ah, I love that. Financial intimacy. We always talk about like emotional intimacy and physical intimacy. Talk about this title, because this is like a term that I'm not even familiar with. And I think this is really important.
Yeah. So it's a term that is, I'm not saying that I'm the first one to use it by any stretch, but it's not necessarily something that's like broadly used or accepted as like the phrase to talk about something like this. You know, like there's financial freedom or right that has people use that widely, or financial independence. But this is something that when I wrote the book, I felt like I want to have this term get out there, because I do want to support a shift in how people think about money. And truthfully, if it's something that you're sh- either fighting about constantly or even struggling to get food on the table or keep the lights on, you may not care upfront about the kind of intimacy part of it. But my hope is that between my platform and my services and all that, and to help people get to the healthier spot, and then for us to cultivate intimacy, including because this is just a hard topic. And that means that there's a chance for people to be honest and vulnerable with each other. And in this case, it can also make a material impact on your financial well being. And so that's, I think, a powerful combination for it.
Yeah. And so what a gift that would just like keep paying dividends over and over again if you set people up with the skills. And I see your book talks about like getting clarity, becoming a team, having peace of mind with money.
You're 100% on point about the skills aspect of it, because I have from day one had clients who come to me and either they explicitly ask me to just tell them what to do, one or both of them, or, they are ultimately hoping for that. And I'm like, listen, if that's what you're looking for, uh, working with me is probably going to disappoint you, because that's not what I'm here to teach. I want this to be something where you can learn how to tackle these things yourself, and even good things. And I think, okay, just like maybe the lesson that I've learned that has surprised me the most over the years is that, like, Biggie Smalls was right, that more money does create more
More
problems from a particular point of view, right? Which is just that now you have to decide what to do with that money. And it sounds like that should be a wonderful position to be in. And in many ways, it is privilege. In terms of where I come in and help couples, it doesn't take away that stress just because there is an abundance of money there. And it often introduces new complexities and new stresses that in some cases aren't there. So I have clients who make 7 figures a year. I have clients with 8-figure trust funds. It doesn't really, uh, it's not limited to any particular group of people or socioeconomic or income levels to have this tension around money, or to feel overwhelmed by it, or to feel like you don't know how to bring it up, or every time you do, it turns into a fight, and the fight doesn't actually get you anywhere, right? Like, this persists across all different groups of people.
Yeah, it does not discriminate. Money can bring up problems no matter who you are, no matter what relationship setup you have.
Yeah. I mean, I just saw it the other day, like Selma Hayek she gets criticized because she married a billionaire guy. And it's like, and she feels like she has to earn her own money in her marriage, even though the husband is a billionaire. And I mean, she, of course, has earned tons of money and herself. And it's just like, even there, right? It really is capable of it can be a difficulty even for billionaires.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I see this show up a lot in the room where I'm doing therapy and that need of like I can't really depend on my partner because I've been working from maybe this mindset or framework my whole life of what if it doesn't work out? And so I have to make sure I have a cushion. I see that so much in the therapy room. I'm sure you do as well as like part of people's money stories showing up.
Absolutely. And you know, I try as much as I can to not come with a prescription as far as you need to have joint accounts, or you should have some joint and some separate for fun money. My goal is always to help you be able to understand some of the options and the think through together the pros and cons, and then, facilitate you and your partner talking through why those things sound good or not as good for you. It's a real thing. And, depending on the couple, sometimes having your own financial safety net, even if your partner's never done a thing to make you doubt their ability to manage money or to make you feel like they're actually going to take advantage of you, if that's what is necessary for you to feel safe and at ease, and like you can then give yourself fully to the relationship because you feel secure, then great, and I try and have it be as much as possible like a both and kind of situation. You can do what you need to feel secure, and we can also cultivate more uh, joint pursuits and togetherness if that's what makes sense for you as a couple. Uh, and I also tell people you can go step by step. I like sometimes kid with a client. If you aren't ready to have joint accounts, you can buy a toaster together first. I remember a couple who they went in and bought a van together for travels, and that was their big first joint thing. And great, because it met them where they were and allowed them to go at their own pace. It's not a moral thing. It's, I'm going to help you look honestly at where you're at, where you want to go, what your expectations are, and your hopes, even if you are nervous about saying them out loud, or maybe don't even let yourself think that those things are possible. And then once we've gotten all that out on the table, how can I help you get there? And
Yeah.
that path is unique for each couple.
I really appreciate that approach, that you're not just there to tell them what to do and give them the answers, because that would make them so dependent on you to make their decisions. Like, I love that you just like give them education, the options, and help guide them according to what they want out of their relationship.
Yeah. And what's one of the things I enjoy about my job is that it can touch on all different aspects. Sometimes it is actually about like understanding how certain financial things work. Uh, Recently, I spent an entire session discussing how donations to charity work with it, because they were tithing with their church and their incomes were solid and going up. And something that people don't realize is, oh, I make a deduction. It's a donation is tax deductible. And it is, but only if you itemize your tax deductions, which is for, last I've heard, I think 1% or so of people in the US have a reason to itemize. And I don't need to get in all the particulars, but the point is that there's uh, misunderstanding or
Yeah.
sometimes, listen, if I was a nonprofit and I'm looking for donations to support an important cause, I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure people know they may not actually get a financial benefit from making this donation. Right. But that's an important thing, because you might think, oh, I gave, $10,000 and 30% tax rate. Okay. I just saved 3,000. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Right. And so even beyond like the plan part and the human part, there also is just this like pieces of knowledge and understanding certain concepts. Another huge one is like what could be business expenses if you have a business of some sort, that I help a lot of my clients with, because we often aren't really taught that. We don't know that. And even like we might get advice that's either we don't understand what, like, so the accountant is trying to say, or the accountant may not be an expert themselves on a particular topic. And so, I'm always helping people either fill in the gaps where I can, going to chat GPT as necessary, or, suggesting like this is a great topic to talk to an accountant about, or a financial advisor, or a tax lawyer. Because as you're saying, it's like for them to have the skills, because their finances are going to change. You have get a pet or a child, your finances change. It's not just like you earn more, you earn less. There's so many different things in addition to those that will change your finances. And they don't need, I don't want them to have to come to me every time anything changes, be like, what do we do now? Right. Um, so that's really the goal, that they can handle the vast majority of those things on their own. And then, of course, I'm there as a resource for things that feel particularly sticky.
Hmm. And I don't know if you've been labeled this, and I hope this is an appropriate one, but I almost see you as like kind of a translator for people who see like financial, tax, IRS language as like a foreign language. Like I
Hmm.
identify as one of those. It's like you're the translator to make it digestible for people who like have not been taught or maybe not been taught correctly, like these concepts so that we can get familiar with them and make the decisions ourselves.
I think that's absolutely right. And, it's not to say there are resources out there on these topics, but it's like the effort to find it and then to try and comprehend it. And it's just you with a recording. And then, it's like my goal is that I want to, of course, develop rapport with my clients. And then hopefully, not only is it a more engaging conversation and they can ask questions if something is unclear, but also hopefully they don't feel like they're being patronized, because these are not just things that we're not taught, in some cases, pretty complex stuff. Hopefully, that I can help them bridge the gap. And because of my background and like my interests, I like to understand all the different things. But part of what I do with my clients is help them identify what is really important and impactful for them right now, given where they're at in their life and their financial lives, right? Like if you're in your 60s, the way that Social Security benefits are treated for income tax purposes might be a really important topic. If you're in your early 30s, you're probably not thinking about that too much. So that one can wait. Maybe we can talk instead about like how 401ks and Roth IRAs work. And just to be clear, I don't give legal advice or investment advice or tax advice, but to help people understand what the heck these things are and how they function. And then tell them, okay, here's some places to go if you want to explore it further and maybe get advice tailored to your specific situation, at least for the stuff that's like out of my scope. And that's it's a really important piece. It doesn't, financial education is not the whole story, but it's also not none of the story. My hope is to support my clients in a variety of different ways, given my background and experience, and then help them figure out how to fill in whatever other gaps they might have.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I think it is so necessary. I mean, I even think that like there's so many things I wish we would do differently in the United States with how we present education. Like why are we not having an actual financial course for people? But I don't want to get on that soapbox because I'm definitely going to tangent us to somewhere else. And I want to talk
Sure.
about your book. So, is there anything you want to say about your book before I dive in and kind of ask some questions about some of the chapters that you have?
Really, my book is full of the same stuff that I do with my clients. And, I encourage people, if they're feeling stuck, they can even just work through the book and see if that sticks. And all right, if you're finding that to be challenging or you want particular support, or whether it's because the conflicts are still challenging, or because, it's hard to find the discipline to keep working through these things, reach out to me. But it's really meant to be there as a resource and hopefully help couples have financial intimacy. Yes, but it's like, why? Because the goal is to make your life better, right? To make your relationship stronger, which makes your life better. And that's ultimately what my work is about. And so, my hope is that the book supports that.
Yeah. And for you to take all of the ideas in your brain and how you usually hold your coaching sessions and to make this into such an accessible resource for people so that they can take these skills like mm, chef's kiss. Like, it's so beautiful that you're giving such a gift who may not be able to either afford services with you or like find the time to do coaching. This can really sounds like make a shift in how relationships handle money.
It's the hope. I mean, there's nothing that was like held back because I'm like, I have been inspired by some other coaches on this idea that like you can share things with people and there's going to be some group that is going to be able to get what they need from the book. And so, okay, you don't have to come and take the time and money and energy as far as working with me, but there's some percentage is going to be like, I really want what this is pointing at. I want to feel like I understand what's going on financially and like my partner and I are on the same page, and at least take that stress or anxiety level from maybe like a 8.5 down to like a 5 or a 4, maybe even a 3, right? Like, then I'm here and, come speak to me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. What a help. Always a resource if we need. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I want to take a moment to invite you to sign up for my free attachment dynamics workshop. I have partners use this as a foundation before we get started in relationship therapy. By watching this, you'll learn how to recognize negative communication patterns, understand how power dynamics show up in conflict, and most importantly, discover ways to turn conflict into opportunities for deeper emotional connection. And the best part, this is free for you. Make sure to head to pagebond.com or hit the link in the show notes to access it for free. Now let's get back to the episode. So let me dive into some of these chapters that catch my eye. And of course, I don't want to have you divulge everything because, of course, there's so much to read actually in the book. But one thing that I am curious about, you talk about relationship pitfalls, like mistakes that couples make when it comes to money. I'm guessing there's quite a few pitfalls. So, what would you say some of the big ones that we don't even think about screw up how we handle money in relationships that we might have not have already talked about?
Yeah. Well, immediately, and something that we have touched on is like that more income can be a really positive force. And also, if there's things that are interpersonal about it, about the tension, stress, or conflict, that it's not necessarily going to resolve those. The other thing that I see is if you're one of those couples who's in a place where, you're not connecting about money, whether you're fighting about it or just avoiding it or what have you, usually there's at least one person who's feeling some anxiety and or overwhelm. If you try to address that by going directly to your budget or your credit card statement, that is oftentimes going to, it's like a short-term fix maybe, but it will usually not get you where you want to go and can create more conflict. And
Mm.
the reason is because if you haven't sat down and figured out a vision for where you're trying to get financially, and you don't feel like safe to talk about these things together, then if you try and figure out what to do about a particular expense, or like, we need to cut $100 a month, I think we should remove X, Y, and Z expense. Well, you and your partner are two different people. So the likelihood you're going to be aligned is pretty low, at least to be perfectly aligned, right? I mean, shout out to going through and checking for subscriptions that you didn't realize you still had on your credit card statement. Like, that's a huge thing to do because those are often no brainers. But if you go straight to the numbers like that without this broader context, without feeling emotional trust and safety around talking about money, even if you're able to move forward and like shave that $100 a month, in theory, at least off of your expenses, in the long run, you've probably just deepened whatever dynamic already wasn't working. And like, it involved one partner strong arming the other, or one person just like with feeling so anxious and needing to cut that money, and the other person reinforcing their role as like the one who acquiesces and then feels resentful later. And, it's like it can just reiterate and these patterns and habits, not to mention that the particular financial decision you're making, you're missing out if it lacks context, because it's like, well, for what reason are we cutting $100 a month? Right. And then there's different ideas and different options, right? Sometimes there's emergency situations. So, I mean, anything that I'm saying is contextual, right? So for folks listening, of course, think about how does this fit with your particular situation? Sometimes there's an emergency, you owe a gambling debt to the wrong person. You got to generate $100. It is what it is. Okay. But for those who are unfortunately not in that kind of situation in the moment, if you can build that foundation, it's going to serve you in the long term and then allow you to make more aligned decisions and to feel better about them. Your situation matters. Sometimes I have clients who feel like, oh, I overspend. I just spend buy ridiculous things, or their partner says that about them. And I say, look, if you were a Kardashian, what you spend is no problem, right? It's like probably quite low. It's relative to your situation. But also of interest is not just figuring out what are the things that are most important to you and most worthwhile spending money on, but also, why do you judge yourself so harshly about it? Or why does your partner, why do they feel so upset by your spending? Why does that create so much anxiety or frustration or even anger for them? Let's see if we can figure out what the heck is going on there, because that's the piece. If you guys don't resolve that, the greatest plan in the world can just fall by the wayside. You can, right? You can crumble it up and throw it into the fire, and that might end up being better than before you had it, or better than keeping it, right? But if you resolve those things and you learn how to connect and communicate and actually understand where you're at financially and where you're trying to get to and the different paths to that, right? Now you can make your decisions with this rich context, and that's just going to make them more robust. There'll be a stronger consensus, which will make most people feel more invested and give it a higher likelihood of sticking. And you have also a higher chance that the decisions you make are actually appropriately reflective of what matters to you, right? Or if you find out that they aren't, then you can change things up, and it's not the end of the world either. So that kind of foundation before you jump right into the numbers, I can't stress that enough. Find a way to break the ice, get the conversation going. If you always fight about money, find a way to have at least a dialogue or two that don't involve fighting. And that's what the whole start of my book is about. Like, there's so many interesting questions we can ask each other about money that are not super complicated. They're just like, how did your parents handle money growing up? How do you think that affected you? And how you look at money today? I mean, those are questions you can talk for a long time about. And
Well, therapy session.
yeah, and don't underestimate the impact of having just a couple of conversations that don't lead to fights. It can settle your kind of your mind, your nervous system, whatever, so that now it's not just doesn't feel as much of a harrowing threat to talk about money. And we don't need it to be your favorite conversation, right? We don't need it to be there's zero stress at all when it comes to money, or universal peace of mind, or the Buddha when it comes to no. It's just if we can take where you're at and if you can have 20, 30, 40% less stuff around it, then that makes you more likely to bring something up and bring it up sooner and for that conversation to go well, which then makes it more likely for the time you want to bring something up that you'll bring it up sooner before it gets too bad or too much resentment built. Right. And then you also can handle the financial issue before it gets too out of hand. So I think of it like those kind of ripple or flow through effects are really powerful if you can start with the right foundation.
Mm. You gave so much good guidance right there, and I'm gonna try to put this concisely, but from what I'm understanding is what we think may be an easy fix to our money situation may not just have to do with a simple, "Oh, numbers, cut this, cut that, add this, add that." Because it's not it's like putting a Band-Aid over, like, an open heart wound that needs to be, like, sutured or have surgery on, which is, like, that more intimate emotional conversation
Yeah,
around this. Mhm. Okay. Alright.
100%.
Yeah, and I love the idea of getting, like, a few wins where you can feel more settled in having better conversations. If we can have this hope inspired by some conversations going well, it seems like that can really feed into this idea of, "Oh, okay, so if that conversation went well, maybe we can approach this financial conversation that has been causing a lot of conflict."
Right. And along the way, by talking about these kinds of things like how you view money, your experiences, and how they shaped you, hopefully you and your partner are also learning more about each other. So if I understand how stressful money was for you growing up, let's say, that gives me maybe more grounds, like I'll more naturally have empathy with you if I'm feeling frustrated about how you're dealing with money in the relationship. It also means if you uncover more of your own stresses around money and where they come from, or your points of view around money and where they come from, that's also helpful for you and maybe can help you not get as overwhelmed or activated when you're talking about money with your significant other. I mean, it happened the other day. I was going to pick up a little snack for myself and my wife, and she says as she's getting out of the car, "Oh, can you get me a bottle of water?" Now, a bottle of water in these places is probably $2 or $3, $4 at the most. And like the items we got for ourselves were like probably twice as much as the bottle of water would have been, right? But as soon as she asked for the bottle of water, it was just like my instinct was but that's just something that I bring to the table at times is that like we have particular senses about what is or isn't good money to spend on. And like you come in with predispositions and they will show up. And thankfully, I was able to say to her, don't pay attention to that. That's just my immediate instinct to grumble about any spending I feel isn't necessary. And of course, I mean, I was getting myself a smoothie. That's definitely not necessary, right? But it just shows up where it shows up. And if you can know some of that about yourself, then you can, it's not that I'm trying to say have no emotions or no emotional reactions. How can you navigate when you do have them and minimize the chance that it turns into a fight? And maybe even have an opportunity for your partner to understand you. That my wife is like, okay, I get him a little bit better now. Like it can be really stressful at times for him. Just things that don't even seem like it would make sense to be stressful in terms of finances, but it can be that way, right? And that can help her think about how to approach conversations with me in a way that's constructive and helpful, right? Which for me is I need often a few moments or a few days to wrap my head around a new expense being added to the monthly fixed expenses or to make a bit. So even if we can afford it, I still need some time to get my brain and my nervous system wrapped around it, however you want to call it, and then we can move forward, right? So hopefully having these conversations and thinking about these histories and experiences and how they affect you will open up some of those opportunities.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something that I wanted to go in the direction too, as kind of what do we do when we have different priorities and we believe in have these differences in what's important in how we spend our money, right? So if I won't use your example, but let's say I like to go to concerts. So I'll use concerts. Let's say I believe $50 concert ticket is worth it. And, you know, I am faced with a partner who is saying, no, I don't wanna pay more than $20. I do miss the $20 concert days. And they're like, "No, that's not worth it. Don't spend your money on that." Like, how do we deal with, like, actual differences, of beliefs? Because sometimes people don't wanna, like, knock their own system of beliefs. Like, is that a stalemate, or can you actually work with that?
Yeah. I mean, you can. The particular kind of prescription for a situation like that, it can be different depending on what are the particulars for that couple, right? So, for example, it could be that the person who thinks they only want to pay 25, they've got something going on, like I did about that bottle of water. They've got something going on about certain concert tickets, right? Like in my family, we kind of have the opposite. It's like if you're going to go see, especially a show at a kind of indoor venue type of thing, it's like if you're not sitting orchestra, why are you even wasting your time? We're pretty snobby about that. And so it kind of cuts the other direction. It's like if you can't spend the big money, then you don't want to even go see the show at all. And then you might miss out on actually an experience that would be otherwise really great. So the first question that I always think of, it's not necessarily the easiest one to answer first, but it's where or why is this actually a problem? So to go back to the Kardashians example, you may not like the idea of spending 50 instead of $25 on the ticket, but if I got 9 figures, 10 figures in the bank, it really doesn't matter. Like it's not likely to be impactful in terms of the quality of our life or, the likelihood that we'll end up in a struggling position financially. So, okay, where does it actually matter? And is it possible to have both? Is it possible that I can have a place where I can spend this kind of money on tickets, even if it's not your thing? And this is part of why a lot of my clients like to have personal buckets, like person one and person two have a certain amount of money, and they might even have that in a distinct account. You can either do it like each month, part of the budget is $100 for you, $100 for your partner, of course, the amounts or whatever you want to make them. Or you could, each have your own accounts. And there's a number of different ways to structure all that. But that could potentially be your money where it's like, this is money you're free to spend however you want, as long as you are, let's say, not carrying a balance on the credit card or something that you use to fund it.
Like, coming
Beyond
up with
that,
your own guidelines.
yeah. And so those are kind of like, that's like a structural way to approach it. On the human side, it's usually just like, why why is it that you value the concert this way, and why is it that you value the concert ticket that way? And maybe you find a less like stale way to ask it than I just did, but the same idea. Just try to understand each other's point of view without it having to be that one person is right and one is wrong. I mean, in the therapy world, we usually just call it validating the other person's perspective, right? Like, and just like, okay, I understand why. Like for you, concerts are just like the one of the things that helps you recharge your battery and feel connected to your body because you love to go there and dance or whatever. Okay, right? Maybe now I have a little bit more insight into you and why you're spending. Um, there are at times questions where it's like there's really broader work and there may not be too much you can do in a particular moment to address that, right? Like if one of you, let's say person who wants the concert tickets, if the other partner is just like feeling intensely anxious about the financial situation that they're in, then these things may not move the needle too much in terms of the particular concert. And that's where it's like, okay, maybe we need something more thorough where this person can explore their relationship with money and learn tools and strategies for improving their situation and coping with the stresses and anxieties that come along with living in our modern world and trying to manage the 10 billion different aspects of your finances to be an adult. Again, it'll vary. In short, understanding each other's perspective is always big. But a lot of people miss that first one. Why is this actually a problem? Right? It's like, take a look. And this is where knowing where you're at financially and what your goals are and how on track you are, it can be huge. Because if you're not on track for your goals, then adding an additional unnecessary expense might feel one way. But if you're crushing it, then okay, is this actually a problem to make this expenditure? And if it's not, then okay, we figure out how to make that work. And for the person who might have that bigger picture anxiety, then, that's something I think it's worthwhile to try and explore so that you don't have to experience that anymore. And like I said, I get it personally. If you have come with that anxiety, it can show up in all kinds of places. It can show up in the name brand, again, Heinz ketchup instead of the like store brand, right? You're like, $2 extra for the ketchup. That's ridiculous. And a lot of this stuff is ingrained from childhood. So, the biggest thing is to not run from the complexities or the differences. Actually lean into them and say, okay, practically, strategically, tactically, what's going on? Is this an issue? How can we resolve it? Something immediate, something longer term. But then also interpersonally or even individually, are there dynamics or even past trauma here, or things like that we can look at? And the more you can improve any of those aspects, it will just continue to help across hopefully a variety of different topics and conversations around money.
Yeah. I mean, as you bring up the idea of how maybe even past traumas could be at play, I just thought of the scenario. What if you were promised an experience by maybe a parent and they were supposed to take you to a concert and then never did? And so maybe then you hate concerts and don't see them as valuable. And so you can't fathom why your partner would be spending that kind of money, but due to your own experience and your own lens. I have so
Mhm.
many more questions to ask you, but I know we're already going over our time. And I really thank you for going into detail about these topics. But one other thing that I wanted to touch on, and you've seemed to have mentioned it as a common thread throughout these conversations, which I think is just so helpful. But I wanted to get a little bit more clear on values-based budgeting because you talk about this in your book. And just in summary, can you talk about what values-based budgeting is and how that can actually help you get out of, like, really difficult situations when it comes to money with your partner?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics for sure, because part of the goal here, okay, we can talk, there's a lot of emotional and relational pieces to it, but it's also how can we get the most bang for our buck? Like, we work our tails off. If we're lucky enough to enjoy our job, great. A lot of people work their tails off doing something they do not enjoy. So it's like, you want to make sure you're getting the most for your money, right? And it can be easy to, a lot of people feel like, just where did it all go? Like, I can't believe I make this much and I still don't have much to show for it, or what. So values based budgeting is the idea of being really basically intentional about where your money goes. And this, when I talk about this, I'm focused more on day to day type of expenses rather than big picture. What direction are you going? Do you want to buy a home or that? But you can apply similar ideas. The basic concept is to look at the things that you are spending on or could be spending on and figure out a way to prioritize them. But that might sound like a overwhelming task up front. And so what I've done is break it down into some helpful categories. The first one is necessities. So this is things like rent or electric or food. Now, the key pieces to note for necessities are you have to spend money on them or you have to get them somehow, but they also need the amount you spend isn't necessarily fixed, right? Like, you could spend more or less on groceries. In the short term, maybe you can't change your rent or mortgage payment, but it is in the longer term anyway. Like, there is an opportunity there if that is something that you decide is important. But those are the necessities, right? And then the other category, on the other end, you have the, like, I don't even know why we have this expense. It's like the classic one here is the subscription that you didn't even mean to have, or the subscription you forgot you had, or the subscription you don't want to have anymore. But as you go through, you might find other things that you're like, yeah, I really don't know why we end up doing that. And those are the easiest to cut, right? Okay, so we've marked up the necessities and we've highlighted the ones that are like 0 out of 10 would not spend on again, right? Now, the kind of juicy part is like those middle two categories, and how I call them. It's a little bit wordy, but I think it's important because it's like subtle, is totally worth the money and like nice to have, but maybe not totally worth the money. And
Ooh.
you and your significant other are probably going to have some differences of opinion here. But the idea is, by going through this exercise, if you're like, shoot, we do need to cut $100 from our spending each month, you have some place to start. And if you've already cut all of your, I don't even know why we spend this expenses, then you look at how each of you thinks about those middle categories. Which ones are nice to have, but maybe not totally worth the money. Right. It's like,
And where do they overlap first?
yes, exactly. So if you find stuff that each of you has in the lower value category, that's like a great situation. Right. And then if you've exhausted those, okay, but at least it gives you a sense of organization and structure, and something where you hopefully can do it in a time where things aren't hyper stressed, maybe, and you can uh, try to be honest and thoughtful about that. And, it's like, I think personally, there are different places that one can get sushi these days, right? And my wife and I both enjoy sushi. And of the restaurants where we've gotten it, there are a variety of prices and a variety of qualities, right? And so within those, it's like, okay, sushi, sushi from Plata, which is we're both vegan. It's a plant-based restaurant in Fort Lauderdale or in South Florida. Like, it's expensive, but it's like our favorite sushi, right? And then you have like some of these places where we'll get Thai food or something, and then they'll have a veggie roll, which is tasty, but it's just pretty straightforward. You get asparagus, cucumber, avocado, and that's what it is, right? Okay, nice to have.
Doesn't hit the spot.
Right. Yeah, it's nice to have. It may be something where if like the budget had a lot more room in it, you do it, no problem. But if you need to look for something to cut, it's like, okay, maybe when we order from that kind of place, it's something we leave off. And I'm not trying to say that one sushi roll is the difference any more than one latte or one avocado toast. And I mean, Paige, like, none of what I'm saying has, I'm not talking about here the bigger picture and structural considerations and issues and political policies and tax policies and communities versus autonomous, nuclear families and all these things that have huge impacts on all of this. But what I always tell my clients is like, even if you don't like the way the world is built, right? At least for this moment, it's built the way it's built. What can we do so that you're able to have, your best quality of life and achieve the goals that are most important to you, in that situation? What can we do so that you have that much more ease and peace of mind, fewer fights that feel like they have no resolution, and hopefully more connection with your partner as well, more financial intimacy?
Mm. And it sounds like going about it this way can help you still get to enjoy your life, even if like you're paying off financial debt or, in this place where you're trying to put money away for savings. Like you can still enjoy your life, even if it looks different than maybe your lifestyle has been used to. It's adjustable, it sounds like, when you use the values-based budgeting.
Yes. And that's part of the idea. If we just kind of go through life unexamined, then we just spend whatever we spend and we deal with it. Some people, that looks like just doing that thing that they really enjoy. They don't uh, handle the financial impact well, and then it hurts them long term. Sometimes it's people who are like so worried about the financial impact that they don't do that thing or have that thing or get that thing they really would enjoy. And then they're not missing out on that. The idea of this approach is, let's just be intentional and mindful about it. And, ultimately be able to have enough of like a picture and a foundation interpersonally, but also in the numbers, so that you can look and say, okay, if we want to add, to be able to go once a month to a concert and spend $50 on the ticket, what would that look like? What would it look like to carve out that $50 within our plan and what we're trying to achieve, so that we're not jeopardizing our other goals, but we can still enjoy the concert? And, the idea of putting more money towards the things that you really enjoy is starting to gain some traction in the world of like financial advice and thinking. And you know what? It's something worth considering, because enjoying life is, I don't want to get
Why are
too
we not?
philosophical about it, but right, right. And so, if this can help you have more opportunities for that, then I think it's a really great thing, including because, like, to be able to not just to be able to travel, but to be able to travel and not feel anxious before, during, and after about the financial implications. To be able to go out to a
Oof.
nice dinner and not feel stupid before, during, and after because how could I spend money on this just because I like food or whatever? It's going to help perhaps calm down some of those voices and allow you to be more present to enjoy that thing. So that's really the hope of it.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I love that so much. So, I feel like we still have, like, so much more to talk about in your book. I mean, listeners, you're just gonna have to read it. I'm sorry. We can't talk forever in here. I know we could, but we both have lives, and, so we have to get back to them. But thank you so much for sharing and going in depth a little bit more
My
about your book
pleasure.
and all the really great things that it has. Can you tell listeners where to find it and where to find you and anything else you have going on you wanna share?
Absolutely. So my website is couplesfinancialcoach.com. So you can always contact me through there, or adam@couplesfinancialcoach.com is the email. If you go to couplesfinancialcoach.com/book, like BOOK, that's not for booking a session. That's couplesfinancialcoach.com/schedule. But in this case, /book is you'll be able to find the link to my book, which is available on Amazon, for like Kindle, ebook, or for paperback. You can also go on Amazon and search Financial Intimacy for Couples, and the book should pop up. And yeah, give it a read and see where it can add value to your life and improve the quality of your financial situation, your relationship. That's the hope. I'm couples financial coach on social media as well. And just feel free to reach out if there's anything I can offer to help you thrive in your relationships and financially.
Fantastic. Alright, listeners, your job is to now read. Got a lot of reading to do. But I'm so glad that everyone has stuck with us through this episode and hopefully brought a lot of nuggets with them back to their relationship or even just themselves if you're not in a relationship. So, Adam, thanks again for being a guest to be on the show of Stubborn Love again. So happy to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me, Paige. It was a pleasure.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Stubborn Love. I hope you gathered some wisdom to bring into your love life and improve your relationships. If you enjoyed today's chat, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. That'll help this episode reach even more listeners. If you have any questions or stories you would like me to cover in the future episodes, drop me a message. I love hearing from you. If you need extra support in your relationships, check out how we might be able to work together by hopping on my website at pagebond.com. Until next time, don't let being stubborn keep you from secure love. Catch you in the next episode.